Welcome back to A Story to Tell from the campus of Dixie State University. I'm Lane Rono, and we're talking today with Laney Larson. Laney, how are you?
Good, thank you.
Did I pronounce your name right?
You got it, yeah.
Where'd you get the name Laney?
My great-grandparents were Lanes, so my parents named me Laney after them.
Well, that was nice of them, I guess.
Yeah, we match, right?
We're almost related.
Yeah, pretty much.
Tell me a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you came from, who your parents were.
Well, I am the fifth of 6 children, so kind of a big family, and we're all spread out, so I'm one of the younger ones. And my parents are Byron Larson and Pat Larson. And my father's passed, but my mom is still living. We've moved a lot. I always tell people that how many times I've moved over 25 times in my lifetime. And people always ask if my parents were in the military, and they weren't. They were just nomadic, I'm pretty sure. So,
travelers.
Yeah.
World travelers.
Right. So we came by it naturally, I guess. But at any rate, we moved quite a lot around, and that was good. I think that was part of developing me, and I liked that, seeing new places and making new friends and all that. So. But I have lived most of my adult life in Utah, although I went to school in Indiana and really love the Midwest, but came back to my roots, I guess. So Southern Utah, I've been here for, well, let's see, about 7 years, and I really love it here. So.
Well, Dan MacArthur, the former mayor here, said you either live in St. George or you're going to.
Right. That seems like that's how it's working, isn't it? There's a lot of moving. So.
I was at a meeting today, and there were people all around the table. I don't think any of them were from St. George, but some of them from the East Coast, some of them from the West Coast, but they all find their way here.
Right. Yeah, it's amazing. It's nice. Good to have
Where
some
were you
diversity.
actually born?
Provo.
Provo.
Right. But
Isn't that where the mental institution is?
Right. I think I was born where it was, no. But yeah, we actually lived in Price, but there was not a doctor who could deliver me in Price. So my mom had to drive to Provo, which was fun, I guess. So.
Well, when I was born, I had a twin brother, and my parents lived in Panaca, Nevada.
Oh.
There was no doctor there, so they drove to Cedar City, and we were born there.
Oh.
So I know what it's like.
Yeah, you got it.
Tell me about what you're doing now, the Dove Center.
Well, I'm Director of Development at the Dove Center, so I oversee fundraising pretty much, and we're working on just growing our organization. We've found that there's a need that's not being met, and we want to really solidify in the community the need that there is, or in the mind of the community, how much this need is needed, and to help people want to support it, help people learn about what abuse is, and so that they can avoid it, and so that they can help others to avoid it as well.
What exactly does the Dove Center do?
We provide resources and services for women who are escaping domestic violence. We also serve anyone in the community, and I think sometimes people are surprised that we have men who also use our services. There are men that are abused? Yes, yeah. So we often, most of our clients are women, but we do have some men that we will assist. So we offer shelter, safe shelter. It's emergency shelter, and that has been in the community for 25 years. And then we have our outreach services also, and that has been something that has been developing over the past 8 to 10 years and has really taken off and flowered in the last 5. So it's really exciting to see how much people are connecting and being able to access services to just help them improve their lives. So our outreach services include counseling and court advocacy. We do hospital advocacy, case management, and we have a kids club. So these services provide information and resources and connections to help survivors just change the direction of their lives and make improvements. We also have a 24-hour hotline. So anyone in the community can call with questions or concerns about someone they know or about themselves. It's fully confidential if you want it to be. And then we can also connect you with services through that. So all of our services are free, and they're available to anyone in the community. So
What is that hotline number?
435-628-0458.
So if someone needed help, they just call that number?
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's our hotline number.
Do you go out and visit them, or do they come to your office, or?
They generally come in for case management. That's how it will, well, depending on the situation. If it's an emergency situation, oftentimes they'll do the intake through the phone, and then they would just come into shelter. If it's something that isn't an emergency or services aren't needed right away, they'll schedule an appointment with case management and can visit at our outreach office, and then we just go from there, just depending on what they need and what they're wanting to utilize from our services.
There's a show on cable TV called Snapped. Have you ever seen it?
No, I
It's
haven't.
about couples, and when one of them snaps and goes after the other,
Oh,
it generally ends up in murder.
wow.
Does that
yeah.
happen here, or not very often, or sometimes?
No, sadly, Utah is one of the highest in the nations for partner murder and murder-suicide. So there was a recent murder from a husband inflicted on a wife that happened from people that were actually local here in St. George just a couple of months ago.
Was that the cruise thing?
The cruise, yeah. So we were already one of the highest in the nation, and then to add on that, there have been some others that have happened recently this year as well, and that is increasing that number. And something that's really sad and surprising, I think, to a lot of people is that even though in Utah we have one of the lowest crime rates in the nation, we have one of the highest rates of domestic violence. And I think that surprises people because we're seen as such a family-oriented state that people don't expect that, but unfortunately that is the sad truth, where 1 in 3 women are likely to experience domestic violence in their lifetime.
1 in 3?
1 in 3.
That's a lot of people.
It's a huge number. So if you think about the number of women that you know, statistically speaking, a third of them are going to be abused at some point in their life.
Well, I haven't abused any of them.
That's good. Good for you.
I was trying to calculate the number of people I know.
And it's hard to, because I think sometimes, we as a society, a culture, even across America, I think have this view that abuse is hitting, kicking, punching, but there are a lot of other aspects to abuse. Financial abuse is a huge one because it keeps the victim stuck in a situation where he or she cannot leave and find resources on their own. And then there's, of course, sexual abuse, and then psychological abuse, which is this really ugly thread that runs through all of them. And with any type of abuse, there is a component of psychological abuse where the abuser essentially makes the victim feel that it is their fault, or that they deserve it, or that they are not capable of removing themselves from the abuse.
Do they know what causes it? What's the primary cause? Why is it so high of the rate in Utah?
I don't know that. I don't think that there have been any specific studies about why Utah is higher. I think that, there are a lot of opinions about maybe the more patriarchal kind of society that we have here, lending itself to that. Also, a more highly, closed religious kind of community where families are turning inward and looking into their small community rather than, leaving, and they don't want to, bring a bad name onto their family. I guess, to describe what they're experiencing. And so a lot of times it gets hidden and buried and set back and not addressed.
What do we need to do?
You know, we need to educate ourselves, and we need to be aware of the signs of abuse. We need to be aware that abuse is not intended for, or that it doesn't happen to just one demographic. You know, it's not a respecter of age or race or gender or financial status or education level. It happens at any of those, and I think it's something that we need to accept as a society, to understand that it isn't just one population. And I think something else that we can do as a society is to shift our focus from you know, kind of blaming the victim to seeing how can we now support the victim? How can we help that person to become a survivor and find his or her own strength and resources to change the course of their lives? And that's really the philosophy that we hold very dear at Dove Center, is that we are not replacing, you know, abuse happens because the perpetrator is seeking most often for power and control. And so we do not want to replace the perpetrator as the next entity that has power and control over this person. But we believe that all adult capable people need to have that power and control to themselves. And so we are very focused on empowering the victim to become a survivor and providing the resources that they need and the resources that they want at the pace that they are willing and able to go.
How can we as innocent bystanders help the individual and also the program?
Well, if you know of an individual that is experiencing...
What are the signs?
Hiding information, like if you ask, well, what do they, you know, if they're not being involved, if they're not going to different activities, if you notice, like a lot of times with family members, the perpetrator will cut them off from communication with family because they don't want to lose any of their control. And so if you notice that the person is not coming to functions and not participating, if you notice any kind of bruising where a person, you know, can make excuses or kind of laugh it off in some kind of a silly way, if you see that happening, that's definitely a sign. And then I think too, just if a person reaches out to you and starts to tell you some difficult part of his or her marriage, to not brush it off as, oh yeah, well, marriage is really hard. But I think if you can listen and you can start to hear some signs of the psychological abuse where they're being blamed for their problems, where they're being told that they are crazy, where they're being told that they are creating the problems all in the marriage, and where the perpetrator is not accepting any of that responsibility. So, I mean, there are a variety of ways that you can find and look to see psychological abuse and then also physical abuse. But I think the biggest thing is to believe people when they say, yeah, believe that when they say, you know, this is just, it's hard, it seems harder than what it should be, and you know, believe them and accept that. So
then what should we do?
Well, you need to accept that that person is the one that is going to make the decisions. I think a lot of times we want to, you know, take them under our wing and help make the changes for them, but that can be debilitating also. Like I said, it's almost like you're replacing the perpetrator as the one with the power and control. Empowering that person into helping them to understand that they do have the ability to leave, and that when they are ready to do so, that you would be there to assist them with any of the logistical problems. If you have questions about it, there are a lot of really amazing articles online. Our newsletter, we send out articles all the time, and also on our Facebook page. So if you, we would love for everyone in the community to get our newsletter and to have our Facebook. I know it's hard to keep up on everything, but if you get it often enough, every once in a while, you're going to read something that
Right.
could really help you. Or you might share something on Facebook that will hit one of your, 900 friends or whatever and really
How did you
touch
know I had
them.
900 friends? None of them
You
speak
probably
to
have
me, but
1,800 or so. So, yeah, they don't speak to you, I'm so sure. But at any rate, if you can share what you read and what impacts you to some extent, it can really help another person. So there are resources online, and then of course anyone can call our hotline and can ask questions if you're concerned about any kinds of behavior or it's just something that you feel like is kind of off with a person that you can call and talk about that, and we can give you some more.
what was the number again?
435-6, oh, you would ask me that now? 628-0458.
That's what I wrote down here, so it must be right.
It is right, yeah, it just slipped for a half second there.
That's okay. Do we, as individuals, observing something like that, or what we think is like that, have any responsibility to report it to anybody?
Utah is a mandatory reporting state for anyone who is being abused that is under 18 or is not, an adult that is not fully, responsible, like impaired in some way. But or also for elderly abuse. So anyone that has like a dependency on another person for their care, we are a mandatory reporting state, but not for perpetration from an adult to an adult. So there's no reporting requirement. However, one thing that Dove Center has really been focusing on the last few years is this concept of breaking the silence. Don't just set it aside or brush it aside. Don't say it's not your business, because a lot of times the victim would like to approach someone about it, but they don't know how or what or why, and sometimes they can't even make sense of what's happening to them themselves. And sometimes that psychological abuse is so thick, they're so caught in it that they don't really even understand that they're being abused. And so to have somebody call them out on that is really helpful. There was one lady that came into our services, and she has really just made huge improvements. She's just a wonderful person. She's one of I tell her, you're like a soulmate to me. I just adore her. But she started coming to our services a little over a year ago because she had a family member who was raped, and she wanted to understand how to help her. And she sat in these support groups, and she started to hear stories that described her husband of 23 years. And she said at first she was really mad, and she thought, I'm not abused. He's just difficult. He's just really hard to live with, and he has addiction issues and whatnot. And so she at first was a little bit upset about it, but thankfully kept coming to that support group. And through that process, it really opened her eyes, and she has made huge changes. She is now going through the process of getting a divorce. She's been separated from him. She's living in her own home. Her children, she just says, I finally have peace in my life. And she said, it's still hard. She's still working through a lot of things, but she's really been able to get a handle on her life, and it's amazing what she can do. So sometimes that, having a friend say to you, hey, I'm noticing this is happening in your relationship, and that's not right for him to talk to you that way or for her to treat you like that. Sometimes that's enough to just start to clue them in and validate what they're already feeling, because they already feel somewhere deep inside that it isn't right what's happening to them, and they don't fully comprehend the depth that they're suffering, because they're hearing that it's their fault and that they're to blame and that they're the one that needs to make all the changes to make it work and make it smooth. So reach out. Just don't be afraid to say something. Sometimes it feels like you might be violating privacy, but if you do it in a spirit of kindness and friendship and love, it will be well received.
Should it be reported to someone else? And if so, when and when not?
You know, if it's an adult, I guess in the case that I would think that you would want to report is if you are witnessing physical abuse against another person. Obviously, you would want to involve the police, and they would be able to come in and from there connect that victim to services through Dove Center or the hospital or wherever they needed. So that's a really obvious one. But in cases of, you know, psychological abuse or other kinds of abuse, there really isn't a reporting system set up where you would be required to report. If you, you know, and I think even if you called the police on something, they would probably, unless it was a domestic, like a physical, you know, assault kind of a situation, they may not, their hands may be tied in that as well. So mostly approaching that person and letting them know that you're there for them and that you would be willing to help them through the process of, you know, just figuring out what's happening and how to get away from it.
So support them and encourage them to do something about it.
Yeah.
Would that be wrong? Or?
You know, I don't think so. I think encouraging them and supporting them is what they need really at that time. You can provide them with also articles to help them understand. I think that we as a society and a culture accept that hitting, kicking, punching, strangling between intimate partners or anyone is wrong, and we accept that, and we've come that distance. You know, there's another lady that I've met recently, who's a really wonderful woman, has written a book about her experiences in the 60s of enduring 11 years of an extremely abusive, physically and emotionally, sexually, psychologically, all of that, financial abuse, every kind of abuse that you can have. She experienced it, and before she was finally able to escape. But at one point, she went into the police station. She had her 5 kids in tow, and she had a black eye. And she said to the police, "My husband did this to me, and I want you to arrest him." And they were like, basically laughed at her, and they're like, "Lady, that's your husband. We can't do anything about that." And she left and had to go home to her perpetrator. And so, you know, it's shocking that something like that would happen, and you know, and 50 years ago, and that wouldn't happen now. But the same thing is happening for psychological abuse, where we say, well, what did you say? What did you do? How have you been treating him to deserve that? You know, and we kind of, a little bit kind of brush aside the severity of it. And I'd like to see that personally myself, but also as Dove Center, we would like to see that educational component come into our society to help people to understand what psychological abuse is and how to avoid it and eliminate it from your life.
So that phone number again is 435-628-0458, is that right?
That's right.
I have a good memory when I write things down.
That's good.
Well, tell me a little bit more about your own personal life. Tell me about your siblings. You said you have 5 or 6 others?
I have 5 other siblings. I'm 5th out of 6. So I have older, my oldest sister lives in Virginia, and then I have another sister in Arizona, and a brother in Orem, and a sister in Murray, and then my youngest sister is in Idaho. So
do you ever get together?
We're all spread out. We do, yeah. We get together, we'll take a trip. I just actually, my sister from Virginia took a road trip to drop her daughter off at college with a car, and then rented a car and drove down through Utah and then flew home. So I just saw her for the first time in a year last week. That was fun, and then see the others every once in a while when we travel. We talk on the phone a lot, and Facebook is wonderful to see all their pictures and all of that, so it's really fun.
Facebook, huh?
Yeah.
Well, how do they access your Facebook page?
Our Facebook for Dove Center is just at Dove Center. So you can Google the Dove Center, or I mean, search for Dove Center and it'll come up. And yeah, please like our page and you'll get some updates. You'll see we have a video, something that we're really excited about and really feel is going to make a really significant difference for survivors is this acquisition that we had of the Aaron Kimball Foundation.
I was going to ask you about
Aaron's
that. Explain
house.
that.
Yeah. So we're really excited about it because Aaron's house, formerly the Aaron Kimball Foundation, is a set of apartments that are available for survivors to live in longer term after they leave shelter. And what we've found is that women who leave our shelter will sometimes not have the resources to continue to support herself and her children oftentimes. And so they will go back to the perpetrator. And we find that there is about a 7-time cycle of leaving and going back and leaving and going back. And one of the reasons for that, there's also an emotional component, and which we can't eliminate because humans have emotions. But the kind of logistical component is that they sometimes don't have the housing and the resources. So this will give them that opportunity to get on their feet, to establish themselves through work or some job training or education, and be able to get to a place where the survivor can then support herself and her kids without returning. So.
Do these situations ever work out where they get back together successfully?
I'm sure they do. I don't think we see those as often because we're on the emergency end of it and the crisis end of it. So we don't see that type of reuniting success story. But I know that in some of the reading that I've done, it can. I think it's rare, though.
We've got 30 seconds left. What's your final word?
We just really want the community to understand what Dove Center does, that we're a really, really strong organization in this community, that we reach a lot of people who really need it. We would love to have your support and to learn more about us, and hope that you'll look into Aaron's house and how that transitional housing will really make a difference for these survivors in our community.
Well, Laney, thanks for being with us.
Yeah,
Been
that
a
went by
pleasure.
so fast.
That's what everybody says. What would I say? And then, is it over already? Well, it is over for today. Thank you for being with us on A Story to Tell from the campus of Dixie State University.